Hello crafters, welcome to Crafters Autonomous. Today we are going to be weathering some paper to make it look like old sheet music. Part of why I like this craft is because as a piano player myself, I really like old sheet music, but I want to actually play the old sheet music or preserve it, not, cut it up and use it for crafting or frame it where, you'd have to take the frame off the wall to play it. That'd just be kind of weird. So what I like about this is it's a really cool way to make sheet music look like it's old and weathered, to either frame it or put it up somewhere, or if you just want to be really cool when you play the piano or whatever instrument you play and play from old looking sheet music, obviously you can do that too. But it's a way to achieve that old-timey look without actually endangering old-timey music. As far as materials go, you will need some paper. I'm just using regular old printer paper. You will want some kind of a dish. I'm using a cookie sheet, which is super awesome because I can fit 2 sheets of paper in here. It doesn't need to be a super deep dish, just one that's big enough for your paper to fit inside and that it has a little bit of depth to hold some liquid. And the liquid we are going to be using to color our paper is tea. So you might want a couple tea bags. I'm just using a basic decaf green tea. It's not going to make a huge difference what kind of tea bags you use, but I would recommend probably just sticking with a green tea or a black tea. You will also want to have on hand some paper towels, and you will need access to a printer if you want to put music on your distressed paper. Alright, let's jump into this. So the first step is going to be coloring our paper. This is the longest step because you have to wait on it to dry, but it's also pretty simple. You're going to get your sheets of paper and put them in your tray. I'm going to do my paper 2 sheets thick. You can do multiple sheets at a time. It just means that you will have similar designs on them, but the ones underneath won't be as vibrant of the coloring as the ones on top will, because the tea bag won't be directly on top of it. Next, I have this cup of tea. This is from when I did some sheets of this earlier, but you don't have to already have brewed tea. If you don't have brewed tea, you're going to do what I will show you to do next, which will be to have a tea bag and to heat up some water that will pour in here. Even though I already have some brewed tea, I'm also going to do the heated up water technique because that's going to give us some of those dark spots instead of just making all the paper one even color. With your tea bag, wet or dry, either way's fine. Just going to pick some spots to put it on the paper. You can squeeze it out a little bit. I'm just going to set it there to start off. And then you can either have water or already made tea, not a big deal. And we're going to pour this on our paper. So most likely you don't have all the color here because you were most likely starting with just water in your cup. Now here's where it gets fun. We're going to add enough water so that way all of this can be submerged, but we're going to get some different effects by using warmer water because the warmer water is going to diffuse the tea quicker in some spots and we'll be able to get some of these darker patches. So I'm going to fill this up with a little bit of water, pop this in the microwave for about 30 seconds so that way it gets pretty warm, probably warmer than I would drink, but not so hot that I'm gonna burn myself, and then I will bring it back up here. While we are waiting on our water, I can kind of take these edges here and just submerge them really well so that way all of the paper gets wet. Or if you want, you can leave the edges up out of the water more, and that will just mean that the edges stay lighter than the inside, so that's another way to achieve some of the different coloring. You can also, tilt it so that way your liquid runs through and soaks different parts of the paper. But the big idea is we're going to let this sit for a long time so that way the paper will soak up the coloring from the tea bag. Alright, I have my heated up water. It's pretty hot, so I probably want to touch it. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to get some of these darker spots. So I'm going to leave my tea bag in one spot, and I'm going to pour some water, this hot water, onto that one spot right there. I'm going to let my tea bag sit there for a minute. I might push down it a little bit to squeeze some of it out, but if I lift it up, you can kind of see that that one spot's a little bit darker. I'm going to pick another spot. Come over here where it's really light. I'm going to pour some of this hot water directly onto my tea bag. Which also, I think my pan's warped a little bit, so that's part of why it's all pooling that way. Again, you can squeeze it out a little bit to get some of the tea out of the bag. And this spot here is going to have a little bit more concentrated of the coloring because the tea there's a little bit stronger. You can always use fresher tea bags and use multiple tea bags to get different results. So I'm going to pour the rest of this water out on here, And I'm gonna start with a fresh tea bag and again, heat up some water to show you some other techniques. But what we are trying to achieve is different spots of our paper where some spots are darker, some are lighter. You can see here, this was some stronger brewed tea because we had the hot water there and also the water's kind of pooling there and pulling the tea colors to this spot here. So when the paper is dry later on, this spot will be darker. So we'll have some like darker spots here. All right, so now I'm back with a fresh tea bag and some even warmer water. So I'm gonna pick a spot to set my tea bag, put it right there. I'm gonna pour this warm water directly on the tea bag. Ooh, this spot is a little bit hot. It's hard to hold the cup. So if we watch this spot, because the water is so warm there, basically we're brewing the tea bag in this shallow dish right now. Pour some up here that can run down towards that tea bag. Pour some more hot water in this one. So if I lift this tea bag up, you can see we've left that pool of darker, more concentrated tea. I can move this elsewhere and do the same thing to achieve darker patches. And really just play around with it. That's the fun of this project. So once you finish playing around with your coloring and you get it looking kind of the way you want it to, it's a matter of just letting it sit and soak. I would leave this sit for at least an hour. The longer it sits, the more of the coloring that the paper is going to absorb, so you'll get some darker and lighter patches, just greater contrast. So we're gonna let this sit here for a good long while. All the water doesn't have to dry off, but we're gonna let it sit for at least an hour, maybe even 2, so that way we can really get those rich colors in our paper. So we are almost done with our first step, which is dyeing the paper. So mine has only been sitting for about 5 minutes, but I am gonna take a piece of paper to show you the next step, just so that we can get this project going, and then the following steps, I have a piece of paper already ready. So this is step 1, dyeing the paper. So once it has sat for at least an hour, more is better, we are going to move on to step 2, which is going to be drying the paper and creating the border. So you will need some paper towels, and I'm just going to unwind several and put them down here on my table. Like I said, this paper's only been sitting here for about 5 minutes, so it's not gonna see as much coloring as yours will end up with in the end. So I'm just gonna take this first sheet of paper, out of my water, my tea water. I'm gonna lay it on my paper towels. Now, as you can see, we already do have some of these darker spots forming, but by letting it sit longer, it'll get more coloring. We'll move this out of the way, and I'll finish these ones later on off camera. We're going to blot this mostly dry with paper towels just to speed up the drying process. But before we do that, we're going to tear off our edges so that way we can have a really good weathered look. So I'm just gonna start on the side here, grab a little bit, and just kind of pull. And you can pull big sections, you can pull little chunks. I like to, on the corners, kind of pull the corners in like that. I'm gonna go all the way around. You don't have to go all the way around. I personally just like the look of going all the way around and not having any flat edges. Because our final step is going to be printing on this, you don't want to pull it in too much or else the margins of your sheet music won't entirely fit on the paper. But you want to tear the edges while it's still wet. Once you finish tearing off the edges, just get another piece of paper towel. Just gonna blot this dry. All right, so I finished blotting out my paper. The last part of the drying step is literally just wait on it to dry. What I like to do is I like to hang it up with a clothespin to let it dry. A couple of thoughts on that. So when you hang it up, because it's still wet, it's probably kind of doing this thing where it's folding up on itself, going all up. That's okay, it doesn't have to dry completely flat. I am gonna show you a technique to get it flat enough to go through the printer, but it will work out better if it doesn't get super bended and wrinkled up. So when I hang this up, I'm going to try to kind of hang it in a way that I can get it to go mostly flat. So kind of just get it to hang. If you need to use 2 clothespins to get it to hang flat, then that's good. But about like that, it's kind of bowing forward a little bit, but that'll still work good. So I've got another sheet of paper here that has finished the drying process, and I will show you with this sheet of paper how to finish off our project. So here's my sheet of paper from earlier. On the camera, you can't see as much of the coloring. But in person, it's this really nice tan, kind of leathery color with these really cool dark spots on it. Now our last and final step is to print sheet music on here. But right now, this is really crinkly to go through the printer. So a tip for straightening out, you want to find a surface that has a hard corner. So if we look at the side of my chair here, this has a hard corner. And I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to come from a corner. I'm going to hold my hand on top of it, fold it so it's angled over this edge, and I'm going to pull it across that edge. Kind of holding my hand on top of it. That's going to get some of those crinkles out. I'll grab a different corner, go from a different direction, pull it across the edge. And now my paper is getting a lot smoother. It's still not going to be completely flat, but hopefully your printer, like mine, will be able to handle a little bit of crinkliness. Now my paper is ready to be printed on, so I'm gonna load this in the printer, and then I found some free public domain sheet music online. There's a lot of classical music. If you're using it for your own use, just check and make sure it's in the public domain. There's a lot that you can use for individual purposes, decorating purposes. I specifically found one that has a commercial license, so that way I can use it within the video here. But I've got some music by Chopin that I'm going to be printing out on this piece of paper, and once I get it printed, I will bring it back up here and show you the finished look. All right, I just got back from the printer and here we go. Now you may notice on mine, and you may have run into a similar issue, where it may not have gone through your printer exactly even. My paper is kind of like this, but it printed out like this, so I have this big side here. A couple of options, I can either wet it to re-tear it, or I can just tear it while it's dry. I'm just going to tear it off while it's dry and hopefully not actually tear off the music. The main reason that we do all the wetting things before we print on it is because if the print gets wet, then the print runs and it doesn't look as good. But now I have this really cool piece of sheet music that I can frame, or I can just like randomly play from it if I want to play from old looking sheet music. But it's super simple way. You don't have to print just sheet music on here. You could print song lyrics, you could print words, you could use it for writing letters, whatever you want to do with your paper, but it gives it a very cool aged look. You know, I might go try to play this on the piano right now. We'll see. Happy crafting. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Also, if you're still watching, I'll throw out a bonus idea. You can do the same technique with coffee. So if you have some leftover coffee from in the morning and you're not actually going to drink it, you can color your paper with it. And while we're on the subject, which do you like better, tea or coffee? Let me know in the comments down below.